Hey everybody, welcome to another fun DevSecOps coffee break series. Today, and we're going to be discussing shift left security with a developer-centric focus approach. So as was stated again, I'm Bill Manning, and today I'll be joined with, again, my awesome buddy over here, Asaf. Say hi, Asaf.
Hello, everyone. Pleasure to meet you again and see you again here. My name is Asaf Cohen, Director of Security Solutions at JFrog, accompanied by the awesome Bill that is going to lead this session. I'm going to explain about the shift-left approach of how to have security orientation and security visibility for developers.
Excellent. So let's just kick off since we have a limited amount of time. So first of all, just a quick recap again, if you've joined us in the previous series, and I'm sure all you guys probably understand what free and open source software is, because shift left is a way for companies to go ahead and address issues that could be potentially problems with free and open source software before they begin. We'll discuss that today, and it's also the place where you get the maximum amount of ROI on any sort of security product, right, by putting the developers first and having them approach and actually attack any issues that they might run into. As a quick reminder, when we talk about free and open source software, my favorite thing is always, free as in speech, not as in beer. As you guys know, 85 to 90% of your software is actually someone else's. Thus, the reason why shift left is a very, very important factor when talking about DevSecOps, because it shouldn't be just part of your build process. It actually should be addressed beforehand. Developers have a certain level of responsibility, and especially when most of the things that you're utilizing to do your software is someone else's, and understanding that maybe up to 75% of those actually contain at least one vulnerability when you're pulling them in. How do you do it in such a way that's very seamless to the developer, and that the developer has awareness, but at the same time it's non-intrusive? And when you look at all of the various components that you're utilizing to build your software, understand that almost 50% of those has at least one high vulnerability, and a lot of those components are actually 90% of them are sometimes are abandoned, out of date, not in use, or in some other applicable manner. The thing is that you want to make sure that you're able to do things, because 74% of those actual binaries that have those issues can be addressed with a simple fix. But the problem is how do you get that information to the developer to make sure that they understand that the component they're using could be potentially threatening or in jeopardy? And then on top of that, how do you have remediation around it? How do you address that in such a way that the developer can do it seamlessly and do it in such a manner that they don't have to do as much investigation or thinking, and they can take the suggestions and also provide it at the front line where it matters most? Of course, in Artifactory, there's all that information that we've discussed in the previous days, and I will touch upon that. But at the same time, there's ways to do this if you're a developer. Now, we're going to talk about the standards, standard development process. I'm just going to go over it quickly. I'm a developer. I have an NPM project in this case. And one of the key components is when I'm building this project and when I start is that I have a package.json where I define my dependencies that I want to use to build my software. Now, remember, and NPM is very notorious for this. I always like to talk about NPM because you could define 5 things in your package.json and 600 other items come along with it as indirect dependencies to the direct dependencies that you're looking at. Now, pulling those in when you are doing, say, something like npm install, the idea is that you're pulling from a remote source, but how do you trust that remote source? How do you actually trust the binaries that are in there? And that's one of the main things today with a lot of things like dependency confusion, typo squatting, all the potential level of attacks that might happen, and they come in through the developer. I mean, we talked about this in other previous sessions, and Asaf and I have done many discussions around this. But when you're using Artifactory in your process, you're setting up a barrier between your developer and the actual remote source. And you're also given the ability for your development organization to have consistency. So when instead of a developer doing an npm install or doing a pip install, or they're compiling code in Maven or C and C++, what this does is that it puts Artifactory in its way to proxy those third-party transitive dependencies from those remote sources to the developer. And when you do this, one of the nice features about it is that all those requests, when they go in, are very straightforward to do, right? So in other words, if you followed our previous versions of the series, or if you use an intro to Artifactory, you know that setting up your repositories and designing your repository structures to match your SDLC, dev, QA, and production. But the remote repository is really the key factor in this that we're going to discuss most of our information about today. And the thing is that once you've actually gone in and you've set up all the proper things you want to do with Artifactory, you design your repositories for the project, and you go ahead and you implement simple changes to your code or your client, in this case, in some cases, to pull that information down, you've now set up Artifactory to be a proxy between you and the externalized source, thus shielding the developer. Another key component of this is that when those binaries are requested, if you have a team of, say, 1,000 developers and developer 0 brings in that binary, and you have all the other 999 other developers using Artifactory also, it means that they're all using the same level of binary. They're using the same third-party transitive dependency. Now, the thing is that in that respect, you're providing consistency by having them all utilize the same components. But what about understanding how safe these binaries are? And understanding that, the quick thing about it is that we have our product called X-Ray. Now, X-Ray is our security vulnerability license compliance tool, and this allows you to do things such as shift left. And I'm going to show you in a minute actually how to do things like that today. So first of all, let's talk about the repository level. And when we talk about the repository level in this case, let's see, I just need to go in and share my screen here. Let's go look at Artifactory. So if I'm using Artifactory and I'm building out a project, and you know what, for consistency's sake, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, first of all, I want to have as much automated processes as possible. So let's talk about NPM in this case. And in this case, I'm going to go into my repositories. And since we are talking about third-party transitive dependencies, and this is also applicable to local repositories, but let's go to remote repositories for a second. So when I've actually gone ahead and I've actually set up my remote repository for the level of project that I want to do, and I want to ensure that those binaries are safe and secure, I could do it in an automated fashion. And one of the first ways to do this is to go in and enable indexing in X-Ray. And when you enable indexing in X-Ray, that means that our X-Ray product becomes contextually aware of the binaries that are being requested from that third-party source. So when I do my npm install and I pull the binaries through, it allows me to go ahead and scan those and actually make sure they're safe and secure. How do I do that? Well, first I have to enable indexing in X-Ray. Secondly, I need to go ahead and define rules and policies to enforce this. And if you go to our policy section, you go in, you can define a new policy. And in this case, it's applicable, by the way, what I'm about to show you for licensing and for security. I can go define rule sets. And when I define my criteria for my rules, either around CVE, where I say I want to make sure that these binaries have a certain level of acceptability, maybe low, medium, high, and critical. If I find anything with, say, a critical nature, I want to do something. Or if I use CVS as score, I might set my range to something like 8.5 to 10.0. And if it falls within these ranges, how do I have it so that I can actually, first of all, evaluate binaries I currently have in Artifactory? Secondly, how can I also have it so that I entrust my developers to continue doing what they're doing while still ensuring security? So once I've defined my criteria, you have a series of actions. And in the actions, we have a bunch of things like trigger a webhook, so you can have real-time monitoring. For myself personally, one of the things that we have is I have a Slack channel set up where, if I'm a developer and I do, say, an npm install, if it was actually loading faster, this will let me know if there's any vulnerabilities in real time. I can send a real-time alert and say, oh my God, I just brought something in, I should go look at it. I can also set up rules so that I can receive emails. And also I might get an email that says, one of the binaries that you brought in has this sort of level of vulnerability. You should do something about it. Or it's not compliant with our licensing structure. But the more active approach, the more active way in which you can do this is this. You have block downloads and block unscanned artifacts. Block downloads will stop the consumption of a binary that's currently already stored in Artifactory from that moment forward until you allow it. This is for things that you've already worked on. And we've talked about in other sessions on how you can, if you do find an issue, how you can trace it through and see where it's affected throughout time. But the one, if you want more shift left active approach, is block unscanned artifacts. This means that a developer can do pull in a third-party transitive dependency, and when they pull in that third-party transitive dependency, it will make a pit stop in an Artifactory. It will get evaluated by X-Ray. If it meets your company's criteria or your license diligence, it will be delivered to the developer. If not, they will receive an error message as such. Now, this is more of an approach of, I'm not actively, I'm developing and I'm building and all this stuff, and I do my npm install and I get this. But there's even more active approaches that you can do. And some of the other active approaches that you can do in this case is, and I'll show this, is let me start sharing my other screen, is we have Ide plugins. And the Ide plugins that we have allow you for things like IntelliJ, Eclipse, Visual Studio, or in my case, VS Code. And if you look here, I actually have a project, and if I go in here just really quick, I'll just say remove node modules just to get rid of it. I'm removing my modules right now. I can also go ahead and then say I'm going to do a remove. I'm going to say package lock.json just so you can see. So let's get rid of that. And what this is doing is actually right now I have no dependencies. Let's go in and do a quick npm install as if I were a standard developer. There we go. npm install. Now, I've already configured my npm client to go ahead and pull all my artifacts from Artifactory. As you can see up here in my publish area, I've actually also, when I build something, I'm going to publish this information into Artifactory also. Now, we have complete other things that other webinars that we've done on this subject. I would recommend picking it up. But if you look here, I had my npm install. I just had a scan from X-Ray. And if I'm a developer, I can go in here and take a look and say, oh, look, interesting. Here are some potential threats and some potential warnings that I have about the third-party transitive dependencies right in my IDE. And it allows me to go look at those pieces. It allows me to get generalized information around the component, and also, too, if there's any issues. And if there are any issues, let me have some more information about it. And then the other cool part is that if there's remediation, I have active remediation available. Now, another key thing I could also do is that if I wanted to have even more a different kind of approach, and I didn't want to go ahead and actually utilize the Ide plugin, we also have our JFrog CLI tool, which is another way for you to go in there and actually look at something. Like, so here's an example of a GitHub repo that I'm actually utilizing. And if I use the command here, let me go here. Where did it go? I'm going to use our JFrog CLI. It's the X-Ray command, and I go audit npm. So what I'm doing right now is I'm using this to go ahead and scan the actual binaries that I'm utilizing. This is very akin to the way you would do an npm audit. The only thing difference here is that as a developer, I can look quickly at something that I'm utilizing, and I could say, oh, here are some potential threats or some potential issues. I have some high severities. I've got some medium severities. I also have remediation. And what's great is when you correlate this between things like using Artifactory and using our build browser to find issues, and even if you want to go research it, so we have all these capabilities, but you can use our CLI, you can use active approach, using the IDE, or you can move a more passive approach, but it's still kind of active, is by setting up your repository structure and building your Artifactory watches and rules for watches and policies to do it also behind the scenes so that you're not introducing something without even having the developer actively be a participant in it, because it's actually being done behind the scenes. So this is just a quick talk on how you can go ahead and utilize some of the various tools we have. All this information is available, but this also there's ways to combat and have your frontline approach and have it so that your developers can work seamlessly with a lot less intrusion. That's pretty much the talk. Oh, you got 1 more minute left. Go ahead, Asaf.
Yeah, I just want to share, like, from like the security expert point of view, the difference between the two components or mechanisms that are being enabled as part of the platform. So the first one that we showed earlier is about that within this CI you can configure as part of the JFrog platform the policies that will have control that's being enforced, I would say, behind the scene, under the hood. So the developers set up the build, and this is how the security operations and the DevOps representative can get visibility into the items. But eventually you find something. There is vulnerabilities. What do you do? Essentially, that's where the developers must be part of this process. Eventually, the security operation don't have the capabilities to solve the issue. They can just alert and get visibility and try to block things, but eventually the ones that will need to solve the issue are the developers. So by having the shift left approach and enabling the developers to get the IDE and the CLI approach, they can get and be the first front and the first gatekeeping and get visibility into security insights that on a I would say regular basis, they would not get these insights. So you can essentially close the gap between the security experts and the developer. And this is what is being enabled by the whole ecosystem that we've built in this platform. Okay, so thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, Bill, for this awesome talk. It's been great. And we look forward to also see you tomorrow.
Oh, really quick. We actually had somebody actually ask a question. Yes, we have Conda, and as one of the repository types we support out of the box. If you have any more questions about it, just type into Google Artifactory Conda, and there's some great information around there on how you can protect your organization around that also. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it today. Hope everyone have a wonderful day. Be safe, be well, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you.